What would you do if your best friend of 10 years secretly worked to steal the business you built together? Melissa thought she knew Marcus better than anyone until she discovered the truth. Their photography studio had been her dream first, but she'd invited him in as an equal partner because that's what friends do. You met Marcus in college during a photography workshop, and you clicked immediately over your shared vision of creating art that actually meant something. For years, you worked side jobs while building the studio on weekends, splitting every expense and every decision right down the middle. The studio finally took off 3 years in, landing corporate clients and high-end weddings that brought in serious money. You were proud of what you'd built together, proud that you'd both stayed true to your artistic roots while making a real living. Marcus started coming in later and leaving earlier about 6 months ago, but you didn't think much of it at first. He said he was taking online business courses to help scale the company, and you believed him because why wouldn't you? Then you noticed he'd been taking more client meetings alone, insisting you focus on the creative work while he handled the business side. It felt wrong, but he framed it as playing to your strengths, and you wanted to trust your best friend. The first real warning sign came when your accountant called, asking why Marcus had requested financial documents without copying you. Your stomach dropped as you realized you hadn't been included in money discussions for weeks. You confronted Marcus that evening, and he laughed it off with that easy charm he'd always had. He said you were being paranoid, that he was just trying to surprise you with a financial restructuring plan that would save on taxes. Something in his tone felt rehearsed, so you did what you'd never thought you'd have to do. You started watching him. You noticed him photographing client contracts with his phone, taking calls outside, meeting with people he wouldn't introduce you to. 2 weeks later, you came back to the studio after a shoot and found him in the office with a woman you didn't recognize, quickly closing a folder when you walked in. He introduced her as Rachel, a consultant, but something about the whole scene felt staged. That night, you couldn't sleep, so you went through your email archives and found something that made your blood run cold. Marcus had been forwarding client lists and pricing strategies to his personal email for 3 months. You hired a lawyer the next morning without telling anyone, and what she uncovered made you feel physically sick. Marcus had been meeting with investors about opening a competing studio, using your client relationships and proprietary editing techniques as his selling points. But here's what Marcus didn't know. You had been meticulous about documentation from day one. Every idea, every technique, every client relationship was time-stamped and saved, with clear records of who had developed what. Your lawyer found something else too. Marcus had been cutting corners on the studio's licensing and permits, probably to pocket the difference. He'd let your business insurance lapse and hadn't renewed critical equipment warranties, all while the studio's revenue was at an all-time high. The truly shocking part came when you dug deeper into Rachel's background. She wasn't just a consultant. She was Marcus's girlfriend of 8 months, and she'd been the one advising him on how to force you out of your own company. They'd planned it all out, get you to focus purely on creative work, isolate you from finances and clients, then present you with a buyout offer so low you'd have to refuse. Then they'd claim you were difficult to work with and force a sale of the business. Marcus finally made his move on a Friday afternoon, walking into the studio with Rachel and a contract. His smile was gone, replaced by cold business calculation as he slid the papers across your desk and told you it was time to discuss your exit. He offered you $30,000 for your half of a business worth over $400,000, claiming the valuation was based on actual creative contribution versus business development. You wanted to scream, but instead you asked for the weekend to think it over. Marcus looked surprised that you didn't fight, didn't cry, didn't even argue. He probably thought he'd broken your spirit, that you'd realized you couldn't run the business without him. That weekend, You didn't think about his offer at all. You executed the plan you and your lawyer had been preparing for 2 weeks. First, you secured all the original client contracts, vendor relationships, and creative assets that were legally yours. Then you reached out to every major client personally, not to badmouth Marcus, but to inform them of potential service disruptions due to partnership dissolution. You were professional, warm, and honest about wanting to ensure their projects were protected. On Monday morning, you walked into the studio and told Marcus you wouldn't be accepting his offer. Instead, you were exercising the partnership clause that allowed either partner to trigger a full business audit before any ownership changes. His face went white. The audit revealed everything: the lapsed insurance, the missing permits, the money he'd quietly moved around, and most damaging, the documented evidence that he'd been planning to steal clients for a competing business while still a partner. All of it was breach of contract and fiduciary duty. Your lawyer presented Marcus with a choice. He could accept your buyout offer for his half at the same insulting price he'd offered you, or you could pursue legal action for damages and breach of contract that would likely bankrupt him. He had 48 hours to decide. Marcus tried to bluster, to claim you'd never manage without him, but Rachel had already disappeared the moment legal trouble appeared. Turns out, loyalty wasn't her strong suit either, and she had no interest in being connected to his mess. He signed the papers on Wednesday, selling you his half for $30,000, exactly what he'd tried to force on you. The look on his face when he realized you'd used his own strategy against him was something you'd remember forever. But you weren't done yet, because Marcus still had one thing: the knowledge and client relationships he'd built during your partnership. So you made sure every vendor, client, and industry contact knew exactly why the partnership had dissolved, with documentation to back it up. When Marcus tried to launch his competing studio 3 months later, he found that his reputation had preceded him. No one wanted to work with someone who'd stolen from their business partner, and investors backed away once they learned the truth. Meanwhile, you rebranded the studio under your own name, brought in a new partner who actually shared your values, and watched your business grow by 40% in the first year. Clients loved the renewed energy and the return to artistic integrity. You ran into Marcus about a year later at an industry event, and he couldn't even look you in the eye. He was working as a contract photographer for someone else, having lost everything he'd tried to steal from you. The best part wasn't just that you'd won, it was that you'd done it completely legally, using nothing but the truth and the documentation you'd wisely kept from the beginning. His own greed and shortcuts had been his downfall, not any revenge scheme. You learned that the most effective revenge isn't about getting even. It's about protecting what's yours and letting someone's own actions catch up with them. Sometimes karma just needs a little documentation and a good lawyer. Today, your studio is thriving, your reputation is stronger than ever, and you sleep well knowing you built something real without compromising your integrity. Marcus wanted to take the easy way out, and he learned the hard way that shortcuts always cost more in the end. Looking back, losing a friendship hurt more than almost losing the business, but it taught you who Marcus really was underneath the charm. And that knowledge, painful as it was, saved you from wasting more years on someone who never valued loyalty. So here's the question for you. Have you ever had someone close to you betray your trust in business or friendship? How did you handle it? And do you think revenge is ever justified? Or should you just move on? Let me know in the comments below.